All right, so I want to talk a bit more about this issue. Um, I managed to get this one to generate again, but this is probably going to be a little trickier than I thought, unless I go with the solution I mentioned before, which is just checking more points within a chunk, sampling more points, and making sure they all have the same sign. The Even this is not ideal though. As I mentioned, there are edge cases with doing it this way because you have to think about small bits of terrain that can pass through. Like, for example, a very skinny mountain that passes through a chunk. I know it's unlikely, but even if you're checking many points within that chunk, there's still a possibility that the terrain just perfectly passes through without going through any of those points, which means that the chunk would appear to be empty space and it would skip generation and you would have a gap in the terrain. And I can show a good example of this over here. You can see here, this chunk, all four corners of the bottom of this chunk are in empty space. And then obviously the top four corners are also in empty space. So it's skipping this chunk. And my temporary solution that got the other one to render is checking, instead of checking if just the sign, if they're all positive or negative, I'm actually checking if all of them are above a certain value or below a certain value. And I kept increasing that value in the positive range or decreasing it in the negative. And I still haven't been able to reach the threshold for this one. And I think the reason for that is just because all four of the corners are fairly high above the ground, I don't think any of them are low enough to be a value below, like, I set 0.5 as the threshold. And so in the negative direction, so negative 0.5, these all must be high enough that they're even below that. Sorry, I know it's a bit confusing, but the negative values are empty space, at least the way I've written it. I don't know if that's more confusing or not, but anyways, so this is a problem, right? Because a chunk like this, you can see, even if you check multiple spaces inside of the chunk, whether or not this chunk is going to load is really dependent on which points you choose. And obviously the more points that you decide to check, the less optimized it becomes, right? If you check every other point, then it's basically like doing half of a generation of a chunk, and that's going to significantly have an impact on the speed. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to solve this ultimately. I'm still thinking about it. I might have to go for another walk and think about it some more. I'm sure there's a clever solution to this, but it's kind of a fun programming challenge, So, if there's anyone actually watching this, feel free to try and solve this tricky problem here. I'm wondering if there's some kind of math that you could do to, essentially the problem is create a function with the fewest number of inputs. In this case, each input is a value, a floating point number. So create a function with the fewest number of inputs possible that still gives you as accurate as possible of a guess as to whether this chunk is within the surface of the terrain here. I'm sure there's a better way to describe this challenge, but it's an interesting one, and I like this kind of problem. It's fun. It's fun for me to solve this, but I'm probably not going to solve it today. I'm about to go to bed, but yeah, maybe tomorrow I might try and tackle this, or on the weekend. I'm not really sure yet, but it will be one thing's for sure. It will be an interesting solution. Absolutely. If I don't end up just going with, you know, just brute force checking more points and then just hoping for the best, you know, I really don't like that solution that much, because I think it really does leave room for edge cases like this, and that's just not ideal, you know. And it's better to try and come up with a more ideal solution. So that is what I'm going to try to do.